A government shutdown was looming, but that wasn't even the real story. The real story was how it just ripped the Republican Party wide open, exposing a brutal power struggle at the highest levels of Washington. This wasn't just some policy debate, it was a civil war. And right at the center of it all, House Speaker Mike Johnson. Now, on a private call with his own members, you can just feel the raw frustration. He fought, he yelled, and then he folded. What came next was one of the most stunning political reversals in recent memory. Okay, you have to see this to believe it, because the contradiction here is just staggering. Johnson privately called the Senate's deal and this is a direct quote, crap sandwich. He promised his party he would destroy it. Less than a week later, he's on camera pushing his members to pass that exact same deal. So this brings us to the big question, right? The central mystery of this whole thing. What could possibly force the Speaker of the House, one of Washington's most powerful leaders, into such a humiliating public backdown? Well, the answer reveals everything about who really holds the power in Washington today. To really get what happened here, you have to understand that we're talking about two warring factions, led by two men operating in completely different political worlds. Here's the crucial thing to get. Speaker Johnson is basically walking on a tightrope every single day. He's got a paper-thin majority where any single member can call a vote to kick him out of his job. He's got hardliners breathing down his neck, demanding absolute purity. Meanwhile, over in the Senate, leader John Thune has a totally different reality. He needs 60 votes to do anything, which forces him to make deals with Democrats and appeal to the political center. They aren't just in different buildings, they are on totally different planets. And that right there is the core problem. The demands coming from the conservative House and the reality of how the Senate actually works are so far apart now that compromise looks like betrayal. It makes governing almost impossible. The whole thing was a powder keg, and then a single phone call lit the fuse. All right, let's get to the moment it all changed. This is where a third incredibly powerful force enters the picture, and a single call on speakerphone completely torpedoes a bipartisan agreement. Just look at how fast this all unraveled. It's wild. In the middle of the night, the Senate passes a deal. Everyone thinks, okay, crisis averted. But just a few hours later, Johnson gets Donald Trump on the phone. By that afternoon, Trump is on TV, echoing Johnson's talking points, and the deal is dead. But then, just days later, Trump flips again, leaving everyone with political whiplash. And this gets to the heart of what happened, what we're calling the speakerphone veto. In that leadership meeting, with his top deputies listening in, Johnson pitched his own plan to Trump and guided him toward opposing the Senate's compromise. In that moment, Johnson wasn't just getting advice, he was securing a weapon to kill the bill. And Trump delivered. He went on Fox News and used the exact talking points he'd just heard from the House leadership. For a moment, it looked like Johnson had won. He had the former president in his corner, and the Senate's deal was toast. But that victory was very short-lived, and the fallout was absolutely furious. Because when Johnson was ultimately forced to reverse himself and accept the very deal he had used Trump to kill, his own party erupted. We're talking about a state of utter chaos and betrayal. The frustration was immediate. You had members like John Rose of Tennessee pointing out the obvious. They had followed their leader into a political dead end. They loudly and publicly trashed a bill they were now being forced to vote for. Others, like Derek Van Orden of Wisconsin, were, well, a lot less diplomatic. They felt completely betrayed. To them, this wasn't just some strategic mistake, it was an abomination, a total surrender on their core principles. And this, from Representative Laura Lee of Florida, just perfectly captures the whiplash. She's asking her own leadership, how can we possibly look our voters in the eye and justify this massive flip-flop? How do we explain that everything we said last week was apparently completely wrong? So the bottom line is this. Speaker Johnson had to stand in front of the very same people who had cheered his defiance and essentially tell them, just kidding, we're surrendering. It was a politically impossible and deeply damaging position to be in. Okay, so why should you care about all this inside Washington drama? Because this chaotic episode reveals something deeply unsettling about the ability of our government to even function at all. So let's break down what we learned. First, the Republican Party is deeply structurally divided. Second, trying to govern with a razor-thin majority in this kind of environment is a nightmare. Third, and this is maybe the most important part, the entire legislative process can be blown up overnight by the shifting whims of one person who isn't even in office. And finally, this is a preview of the chaos that could become the new normal. Ultimately, the lesson for everyone in Washington was crystal clear. Aligning yourself with a political position, even one that comes from the very top, is a massive gamble. The political ground is constantly shifting, and what makes you a hero on Friday can make you a fool by Tuesday. And that leaves us with a final, sobering question. This wasn't just about one funding bill or one shutdown threat. It was a stress test of the entire system. And when loyalty is temporary and strategy can be reversed in an instant, is stable, effective government even possible anymore?